Queen Tala sat on her grand crystalline throne, bored after many years of ruling the mighty Viridan Empire. She was tall and elegant, with iridescent scales that changed colors when she moved. The three moons of her homeworld cast strange shadows through the palace windows, making patterns on the polished floor. Another day, another dull meeting. She muttered to herself, tapping her long claws against the armrest of her throne. Her chief advisor, Krell, approached with caution. "Your Majesty, the human representatives have arrived. They await your pleasure." Tala straightened up slightly, her boredom lifting. Humans were new to this part of the galaxy. The Viridan Empire had encountered them only 20 years ago, a mere blink in the long life of her species. "Bring them in," she commanded, her voice carrying unusual tones that human ears found strange. "Let me see these creatures who dare to request trading rights within my empire." The massive doors to the throne room swung open. 4 humans entered, walking steadily across the long hall. Viridan guards towered over them, making the humans look small and fragile. The leader of the human group was a woman named Hannah Park. She wasn't tall or physically impressive, but she walked with confidence. Her dark eyes seemed to take in everything around her, missing nothing. Queen Tala studied her with interest. Unlike the queen's colorful appearance, Hannah wore a simple gray uniform with only a few badges of rank. Her face showed no fear, which was unusual for visitors to the palace. "Welcome to Viridan Prime," Queen Tala said, leaning forward. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Hannah bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. The journey was fascinating. Your empire's technology is impressive." Tala laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "Impressive? I suppose it would seem so to a species that has barely left its home system." The Queen's court laughed politely at her joke, but Hannah just smiled. This reaction bothered Tala, though she couldn't say why. "Tell me," Tala continued, "why should I grant humans trading rights? What can your little planet offer that my empire needs?" "Perspective," Hannah replied simply. The throne room went quiet. Advisors looked at each other nervously. No one spoke to the Queen this way. "Explain," Tala demanded, her scales shifting to a deeper blue. "Your Majesty, humans solve problems differently than Viridans. We think differently. Sometimes a fresh perspective reveals solutions others can't see." Tala drummed her claws on the throne again, thinking. She had ruled for so long that few things interested her anymore. These humans were different, unpredictable. "You claim humans think differently," she said finally. "I find myself curious to test this claim." Her chief advisor leaned close. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss this in private before." The Queen silenced him with a wave of her hand. She was too intrigued to wait. "Commander Park, I have a proposal for you. A game, you might say." The human delegation exchanged quick glances, but Hannah kept her eyes on the Queen. "I'm listening, Your Majesty." "A series of 5 challenges," Tala explained, warming to her idea. "Tests of intelligence, strength, endurance, creativity, and strategy. If your team wins the majority, I will grant humans generous trading rights and give you the moon of Keldor with all its valuable minerals." The court gasped. Keldor was one of the richest moons in the empire. "And if we lose?" Hannah asked. Queen Tala smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "Then your species will serve mine for the next 100 years. Your people will become valuable workers throughout my empire." The humans behind Hannah shifted uncomfortably, but she remained calm. "These stakes seem uneven, Your Majesty. You risk a moon. We risk our freedom. You also gain the chance to prove yourselves worthy of respect," Tala replied. "Is that not what you truly want? To be taken seriously?" Hannah considered this. The Queen watched her closely, fascinated by the human's restraint. Most species would be showing fear by now. "May I consult with my team?" Hannah requested. Tala nodded graciously. The humans formed a tight circle, speaking quietly among themselves. The Queen couldn't hear their words, but she saw animated gestures and serious faces. After a few minutes, Hannah turned back to the throne. "We need certain assurances," she said. "First, the challenges must be fair, possible for humans to complete. Second, the rules must be clear and cannot change once a challenge begins. Third, if we win, all human ships must be allowed to leave your space safely." Queen Tayla was impressed by these reasonable demands. "Agreed," she said. "I will set the challenges myself and ensure they are possible for your species to complete, though not easy. The rules will be fixed, and regardless of the outcome, you have my word that no harm will come to human ships currently in Veridan space." Krell stepped forward. "Your Majesty, as your chief advisor, I must." "The decision is made," Tayla interrupted. She was too excited by this new diversion to listen to caution. She turned back to Hannah. "Do you accept these terms, Commander Park?" The room grew still. Everyone waited for the human's response. Hannah looked directly into the Queen's alien eyes. "We accept." A strange smile played at the corner of Hannah's mouth. It wasn't a smile of fear or submission, but something else, something that made Queen Tayla suddenly uncertain about her game. "Excellent," Tayla said, hiding her unease. "The challenges will begin tomorrow morning. You will be given comfortable quarters to rest and prepare." As the human delegation was escorted from the throne room, Krell approached his queen again. "Your Majesty, I fear you have made a mistake. These humans seem too confident." "Confidence is not the same as ability," Tayla replied. "Besides, I grow tired of predictable days. This will be amusing, at least." "And if they somehow win?" Krell asked. "They won't," Tayla said firmly. "But even if they manage to succeed in some challenges, they cannot win them all. Our superiority is too great." Later that evening, in the guest quarters, Hannah stood by the window looking at the three moons. "Do you think she suspects?" asked Jury, her science officer. "No," Hannah replied. "She sees what she expects to see, a primitive species in over its head." "We've been preparing for this opportunity for years," said another team member, dropping his bag on the floor. It made a heavy sound as equipment shifted inside. Hannah nodded. "The Queen thinks she's testing us, but we're the ones who will learn what we need to know about Veridan weaknesses." She turned from the window, her face now serious. "Remember, we need to win enough to gain respect, but not so much that we seem threatening. The real challenge isn't winning her game. It's winning our place in this part of the galaxy." Outside the palace, the three moons cast their light over the alien city. Tomorrow, the games would begin, and neither Queen Tayla nor Commander Park knew exactly how they would end. The golden sun of Veridan Prime rose over the palace gardens where the first challenge would take place. Crowds of curious Veridans gathered to watch the strange humans attempt what many believed would be an embarrassing failure. Queen Tayla arrived in a floating chair decorated with rare gems. Her scales glittered in the morning light as she settled onto a special viewing platform. Royal Advisor Nexus stood beside her, constantly checking that everything was perfect. "Your Majesty, the intelligence trial is prepared," Nexus said with a slight bow. "The humans will certainly struggle with our ancient puzzle." "Good," the Queen replied, her tail curling with anticipation. "It will be amusing to watch them fail." The human team entered the garden, led by Commander Hannah Park. They wore simple clothing compared to the ornate garments of the Veridan nobles. The crowd murmured at their plain appearance. In the center of the garden stood a large crystal structure, the famous logic matrix of Emperor Zen, unsolved for 9 centuries. It consisted of dozens of crystal pieces that could rotate and shift. According to legend, when solved correctly, it would glow with all the colors of Veridan's spectrum. "Commander Park," Queen Tayla called out, her multi-tone voice carrying across the garden. "Your first challenge is to solve the logic matrix. You have 1 hour." Han approached the structure and circled it slowly, studying it from all angles. The Veridans watched, amused by what they saw as human confusion. Humans can barely manage simple equations, One noble whispered loudly enough to be heard, "This is like asking a child to compose royal music." Ignoring the comments, Hannah began to touch the crystal pieces. She turned some, pushed others, seemingly without pattern. The Veridans laughed softly at her random efforts. After 15 minutes, something strange happened. Hannah stepped back and called her team together. They spoke quietly, pointing at different sections of the matrix. Then, rather than continuing with the traditional approach of solving each sequence in order, Hannah did something unexpected. She began rearranging entire sections at once. "What is she doing?" Nexus hissed, leaning forward. "That's not how the puzzle works. She must follow the sequential path." The queen watched more closely, her amusement turning to confusion. 30 minutes passed. The garden grew quiet as the Veridans realized the human was not working randomly. Hannah moved with purpose, sometimes closing her eyes as if visualizing something no one else could see. "She's treating it as a spatial problem, not a sequential one," said one of the royal mathematicians, who had stepped closer to watch. "That's not possible." At 45 minutes, Hannah made several quick adjustments to the matrix. Suddenly, the crystal began to hum. Light spread through its structure, slowly at first, then faster. "Impossible." Nexus hissed, grabbing the armrest of the queen's chair. "No one has solved it since Emperor Zan himself." The matrix lit up with all the colors of Veridan spectrum, plus some the Veridans couldn't even see but the humans could. The crowd gasped as the puzzle completed itself, rearranging into its final form, a perfect geometric shape that had eluded Veridan scholars for centuries. Hannah stepped back, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked to Queen Tayla and bowed slightly. "I believe we've completed the first challenge, Your Majesty." The queen's scales had darkened to a deep blue, a sign of strong emotion among her species. She rose from her chair. This is unexpected. You found a solution no Veridan has discovered." "How?" Hannah smiled politely. "Humans see patterns differently. We notice that the crystal responds to three-dimensional thinking rather than linear sequences." The queen nodded stiffly. "Very well. You have passed the first trial. We shall proceed to the test of strength." As they moved to the next location, Nexus walked close to Queen Tayla. "Your Majesty, they were not supposed to solve the puzzle. Perhaps we should reconsider." "One lucky success means nothing," the queen replied sharply. "No human can match Veridan's strength. They will fail the next challenge." The strength trial took place in an ancient stone amphitheater. In the center sat a massive blue-black stone, the sacred stone of Krell, weighing as much as 4 Veridan warriors. "Your challenge," Queen Tayla announced, "is to move the sacred stone from its current position to the platform at the other end of the arena. You may use any method, but only human strength, no tools or machines." The Veridans relaxed, confident this would be impossible for the physically weaker humans. Hannah studied the stone carefully, then conferred with her team. A tall human male named Jum Kim stepped forward. He was the strongest of the humans, with broad shoulders and powerful arms. But even he looked small compared to the Veridan guards. Jun approached the stone and tried to lift it. He strained, muscles bulging, but could barely move it. The Veridans chittered with amusement. "See," Queen Tayla whispered to Nexus. "Nature cannot be outsmarted." But then something unexpected happened. Instead of giving up, Jun called over the rest of the team. They positioned themselves around the stone in a specific formation. "What are they doing?" Nexus wondered aloud. The humans had formed a strange arrangement. 3 of them created a system of interlocked arms, while Jun positioned himself at a specific angle. "On 3, Hannah called out. 1, 2, 3. The humans moved in perfect coordination. Using principles of leverage and momentum, they created what looked like a living pulley system. The stone began to move. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, they rolled it across the arena floor. The Veridan crowd fell silent, watching in disbelief as the humans, working together, moved the massive stone that no single Viridin could lift. When they finally positioned it on the platform, the arena remained completely quiet. Queen Tayla's tail lashed against her throne in agitation. They were supposed to fail, she whispered to Nexus, scales now turning a dangerous red color. Perhaps ending this competition would be wise, Your Majesty, Nexus suggested cautiously. Before they. And admit weakness. Never. The Queen's voice was hard. 2 trials mean nothing. There are still 3 more challenges, each more difficult than the last. As the humans celebrated their success quietly among themselves, Hana glanced toward the Queen. Their eyes met across the arena. The human's expression remained respectful, but there was something in her gaze that bothered the Queen. Not pride or defiance, but a calm certainty that made Queen Tayla suddenly wonder if these challenges were going exactly as Hana had planned all along. Prepare the endurance trial, the Queen commanded, rising from her seat. Let's see how these humans fare when their bodies are pushed beyond their limits. As the royal party departed, Nexus looked back at the humans. They showed no signs of fatigue or worry. Instead, they looked ready, as if they had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. The endurance chamber loomed like a massive metal egg in the center of the royal proving grounds. Steam rose from vents around its base, hinting at the harsh conditions inside. Queen Tayla arrived with her full court, scales shimmering with barely contained frustration after the humans' unexpected successes. The endurance trial will test the physical limits of our visitors, she announced to the gathered crowd. Inside this chamber, the heat and atmospheric pressure will gradually increase to match the surface conditions of Viridin's volcanic southern continent. Nexus leaned close to his queen. No off-worlder has ever lasted more than 20 minutes in such conditions, Your Majesty. Excellent, Tayla replied, her tail swishing with anticipation. Let the humans try to think their way out of this one. The human team approached the chamber with serious expressions. Hana Park studied the massive structure, noting the thickness of its walls and the complex control systems nearby. Commander Park, Queen Tayla called. This challenge is simple. Remain conscious inside the chamber for 1 hour. You may select 1 team member for this task. The crowd of Viridins chittered with amusement. 1 hour was impossible. Even Viridins couldn't tolerate such conditions for that long without special equipment. Hana stepped forward. I'll do it myself. Her team looked concerned but didn't protest. They helped her prepare, giving her water and checking something on a small device attached to her wrist. Queen Tayla watched with curiosity. No special equipment is permitted, she reminded them. Just a timer, Hana explained, showing the simple wristband. To track my progress. The Queen nodded, and Hana entered the chamber. The heavy doors sealed behind her with a hiss of pressure. Inside, the chamber was already uncomfortably hot, with reddish lighting that made it hard to see clearly. Through thick windows, the crowd could observe the humans' progress. Begin the sequence, Queen Tayla ordered. Viridin technicians activated the controls. The temperature inside the chamber began to rise. Display screens showed the rapidly changing conditions, heat increasing, pressure building, oxygen thinning. These were conditions even Viridins found challenging, with their heat-resistant scales and specialized lungs. 10 minutes passed. Hana remained standing in the center of the chamber, her skin glistening with sweat, but her posture steady. Impressive, muttered a Viridin noble. I expected her to collapse already. 20 minutes. The temperature reached levels that would cause severe heat stroke in most species. Hana had removed her outer jacket, but otherwise seemed stable. She was performing slow, deliberate breathing exercises. Something isn't right, Queen Tayla said, leaning forward in her seat. Check the chamber settings. The technicians verified that everything was working correctly. The conditions inside were exactly as programmed. Brutal, nearly unbearable. 30 minutes passed. Now even the Viridin guards monitoring the chamber were showing signs of discomfort. Two had to be replaced when they became lightheaded from the heat radiating through the chamber walls. Yet inside, Hannah continued to stand. She looked uncomfortable, certainly. Her face was flushed, and she drank regularly from a water pouch, but she showed no signs of collapsing. "This is impossible," Nexus whispered. "Her internal organs should be failing by now." At 45 minutes, when even the Veridan observers were struggling to remain near the chamber, Queen Tayla could contain herself no longer. She approached the communication system. "Enough," she commanded. "Open the chamber." The door unsealed with a burst of escaping heat. Hannah walked out under her own power, sweat-soaked but steady on her feet. Several Veridans backed away, astonished that she could still move. "How?" demanded Queen Tayla, her scales shifting through colors of confusion and anger. "How are you still conscious? Even my strongest warriors cannot endure such conditions." Hannah took a moment to catch her breath, accepting a cooling cloth from her team before answering. "We study your biology," she explained, wiping sweat from her brow. "Humans are adaptable. We've been training in simulated Veridan conditions for months." The Queen's tail twitched in agitation. "Impossible. How could you simulate our environment on your world?" "We didn't need to exactly match it," Hannah said. "We identified the key stress factors, heat, pressure, oxygen levels, and trained our bodies to adapt. Humans have a remarkable ability to acclimatize." The crowd murmured with growing interest. This was not what they had expected from the supposedly primitive humans. "You're saying you prepared specifically for these trials?" Nexus asked, suspicion evident in his voice. "Of course," Hannah replied simply. "We wouldn't accept such an important challenge without preparation." Queen Tayla's scales darkened further. "The creativity trial will begin tomorrow. I expect you'll need rest after today's exertion." As the royal party departed, whispers spread through the crowd. The humans had won 3 consecutive trials. The Queen's game wasn't proceeding as planned. That evening, Queen Tayla paced in her private chambers, her tail lashing angrily. "They must have cheated," she insisted to Nexus. "No species can adapt so quickly." "I've had our intelligence officers investigating," Nexus replied. "They found records of human research vessels near our outer territories over the past year. They've been studying us, Your Majesty, learning our weaknesses." The Queen stopped pacing. "Then we changed the terms. The creativity trial will include new parameters, ones they couldn't have prepared for." The next morning, the royal amphitheater was filled beyond capacity. Word had spread about the humans' unexpected successes, and now even the lower castes had come to watch. Queen Tayla arrived late, her entrance deliberately grand to remind everyone of her power. The humans waited patiently in the center of the arena. "Commander Park," the Queen announced, her voice amplified for all to hear. "The creativity trial will test your species' artistic and innovative abilities. You must create a work that demonstrates true creativity." She paused dramatically. "However, I have decided to add additional parameters. Your creation must incorporate living Veridan biomaterials and must be completed within 2 hours rather than the original 4. A murmur ran through the crowd. These were significant changes, making the challenge much more difficult. Hannah stepped forward, her expression calm despite the alteration. "Your Majesty," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent arena. "According to the ancient Veridan Honor Code, Section 7, Verse 3, once terms of challenge are set forth and accepted, they shall remain unchanged throughout the duration of the contest, lest dishonor fall upon the one who seeks advantage through alteration." The crowd gasped. These were the exact words Queen Tayla had used during the formal ceremony establishing the competition. "Those words," Hannah continued, "were spoken by you when our challenge began. They are sacred to your people's tradition of fair competition." Queen Tayla stood frozen, her scales shifting between colors of anger and embarrassment. How did this human know their ancient code so perfectly? In the public viewing areas, whispers spread rapidly among the lower castes. "The human knows our ways better than our queen honors them." The Queen's advisors huddled together, clearly alarmed. One approached the throne and spoke urgently in the Queen's ear. Finally, Queen Tayla raised a hand for silence. "The human speaks correctly," she admitted, her voice tight. "The original terms shall stand. 4 hours, with materials as originally specified." As the creativity trial began, Nexus stood close to his queen. "This is becoming dangerous, Your Majesty," he warned quietly. "The lower castes are watching everything. The humans' knowledge of our customs, their unexpected abilities, they're gaining support among our people." Queen Tayla watched as Hana organized her team with calm efficiency. "One more trial after this," she said, her voice low and determined. "The strategy challenge will be their downfall. I've designed it myself, based on military tactics no off-worlder could understand." But as she watched the humans work, a new feeling crept into the Queen's mind. Something she hadn't felt in centuries. Doubt. The royal palace was unusually quiet. Guards stood at their posts, but their postures were stiff with uncertainty. Servants moved through the halls with downcast eyes. Everyone knew what had happened in the war room, and everyone waited to see what would come next. In her private chamber, Queen Tayla sat alone before a large mirror. Her scales had lost their usual luster, fading to a dull gray that reflected her mood. On the table before her lay her crown, an intricate creation of rare metals and crystals that had been worn by Veridan rulers for 20 generations. According to ancient tradition, a ruler who lost a formal challenge must surrender the crown. There had not been such a surrender in over 500 years, but the law was clear. Tayla lifted the crown, feeling its weight. For centuries, she had ruled without question. Her word was law across 12 star systems. Now, because of her own game, everything would change. Was it pride? She asked her reflection. Did I truly believe no other species could match us? Her reflection offered no answers. She placed the crown back on the table and sighed deeply. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, straightening her posture. Even in defeat, a queen must appear dignified. The doors opened, and Hana entered with a small delegation of humans. They wore formal attire now, not the simple uniforms of previous days. Behind them came Nexus and several high-ranking Veridan officials, their scales showing patterns of anxiety. "Your Majesty," Nexus began nervously, "the human representatives request an audience before the formal ceremony." Tayla nodded, her face carefully controlled. "Leave us," she commanded. "I will speak with them alone." The Veridan officials hesitated but eventually bowed and departed. Only Hana and her team remained, facing the Queen across the elegant chamber. "You've come to claim your prize," Tayla said bitterly, "to witness my surrender personally before the public ceremony." Hana stepped forward, her expression serious but not triumphant. "No," she replied. "We've come to offer something better than conquest, alliance, equal partnership between our species, technological exchange, cultural sharing." Tayla blinked, her scales shifting to show confusion. "What game are you playing now, human? You won. The moon of Keldor is yours. My people must honor the agreement." "We don't want Keldor," said June, one of Hana's team members. "At least, not as a possession. What we want," Hana continued, "is a new relationship between our peoples. Keldor could be the site of a joint research center, the first of many collaborative projects." Queen Tayla's tail twitched with suspicion. "Why would you offer this when you could take everything?" The terms were clear. You won the right to demand our service. "Because humans understand something your empire forgot long ago," Hana said gently. "True strength isn't in domination, but cooperation." She placed a data tablet on the table beside the crown. The screen showed plans for joint ventures, trade agreements, educational exchanges, a comprehensive framework for alliance rather than subjugation. "Humans are physically weaker than Veridans," Hana explained. "We can't survive your heat, lift your weights, or match your natural armor. But we survived and thrived because we learned to work together, not just with each other, but with any species willing to cooperate. This is unusual, Taylor said, studying the tablet. Her scales had begun to regain some color. We believe both our species will be stronger together than either would be alone, Hannah said. The challenges prove that our different perspectives can solve problems in new ways. Taylor looked up from the tablet. And what of tradition? What of my crown? The people expect a surrender. Keep your crown, Hannah replied. Keep your title and your dignity. But let the old ways of ruling end today. The queen picked up her crown again, studying it thoughtfully. You knew this would happen, didn't you? You planned for this outcome from the beginning. Hannah smiled slightly. We hoped for it. We studied your culture extensively. Your history shows that Viridans respect strength, but also honor intelligence. We needed to demonstrate both before you would consider us worthy partners. So the entire competition was your strategy to earn our respect, Taylor said, understanding dawning in her eyes. The first step toward any meaningful alliance, Hannah confirmed. Taylor stood, crown in hand. For a moment, she seemed to weigh it, feeling its burden. Then, with deliberate movement, she placed it on her head. Nexus, she called. Her advisor entered immediately, looking anxious. Prepare the grand hall. There will be an announcement, but not the one you expected. Later that day, the palace grand hall was filled beyond capacity. Viridans from all castes had gathered, drawn by rumors of unprecedented events. The royal guard stood at attention, uncertain what they were guarding against. Queen Taylor entered with her full regalia, crown gleaming on her head. Beside her walked Hannah Park, not as a conquered adversary, but as an equal dignitary. The crowd murmured in confusion. People of the Viridan Empire, the queen began, her voice strong and clear. Today marks a new chapter in our history. The human delegation has proven their worth through the 5 challenges. According to our ancient laws, they have earned the right to our respect. She paused, looking out at her subjects. But they offer us something unexpected, not dominance, but partnership. Today, we sign the first treaty between our empire and humanity, not as ruler and subject, but as equals with much to offer each other. Taylor unrolled an ornate document on the ceremonial table. It was written in both Viridan script and human language. This alliance will begin with joint development of Keldor Moon, she continued. The humans bring new perspectives, technologies we have not considered, and a different approach to problem solving. We offer stability, resources, and knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. She turned to Hannah. Commander Park has shown that different species need not compete when cooperation offers greater benefits to both. The signing ceremony proceeded with formal dignity. As the queen pressed her seal into the document, she felt a strange sensation, a lightening of a burden she had carried so long she had forgotten its weight. Later, in a private moment before the celebration banquet, Hannah found Queen Taylor standing on a balcony, looking out at the 3 moons of her homeworld. Your people seem to be accepting the news better than expected, Hannah observed. They sense opportunity, Taylor replied. Viridans respect success. Your victories earned their attention. Your generosity earned their curiosity. And what of their queen? Hannah asked. How do you feel about this new arrangement? Taylor turned, her scales now shimmering with rich, complex patterns that had been absent for many years. I feel released, she admitted. For centuries, I believed a queen must know everything, control everything, never show weakness or uncertainty. It was exhausting. And now I realize that my crown represents not just power, but responsibility to find the best path forward for my people. Sometimes that means recognizing when another approach might be better than our traditions. Hannah nodded. The first lesson of true leadership. One of many I suspect I will learn through our alliance, Taylor said. She looked back at the moons, her scales reflecting their light in new patterns. I challenged you thinking I would teach humans their place in the galaxy. Instead, you reminded me of something my empire had forgotten. What was that? Hannah asked. That no species rises to greatness alone, Taylor replied. The greatest achievements come when different minds work toward common goals. Below them, in the palace gardens, Veridan nobles and human delegates were already engaged in animated conversations, exchanging ideas and discovering common interests despite their many differences. Queen Taylor realized she hadn't lost her crown after all, only the crushing burden of infallibility it had represented. For the first time in centuries, she looked toward the future with genuine curiosity rather than the certainty of one who believed she already knew all answers. As the celebration continued into the night, the news spread across the empire. The game that was meant to put humans in their place had instead created something unprecedented, a partnership that would change both species forever.